In 2019, the share of affordable housing was close to 45% in the overall sales.
Right.
Today, it stands to almost 9 to 10%. So that's the stark difference that we have seen. While the upper segment has shown a significant growth, the affordable has actually kind of fallen off the cliff. And if you talk
Right.
about country like India, which is a housing deficit country, this kind of
Right.
growth is just really unwarranted for.
Hello and welcome to Macro Decode. The decline in the share of affordable housing in India has been one of the most striking changes in the residential real estate market over the last decade. Despite the PM Awas Yojana scheme, India is facing a housing shortage and owning a house is becoming out of reach for middle and lower middle class people in India. Prashant Thakur, Executive Director of Anarock Group, is joining us for more insights. Welcome, sir. So, the share of affordable housing in total residential sales has been declining steadily. How much has the share of affordable housing come down in the past 10 years?
Sangeeta, post-COVID, the overall residential real estate has seen a significant growth. But unfortunately, this growth came at a cost of affordable housing. In 2019, the share of affordable housing was close to 45% in the overall sales.
Right.
Today, it stands to almost 9 to 10%. So that's
Oh.
the stark difference that we have seen. While the upper segment has shown a significant growth, the affordable has actually kind of fallen off the cliff. And if you talk
Right.
about country like India, which is a housing deficit country, this kind of
Right.
growth is just kind of really unwarranted for.
Right.
And there are, various reasons for the steep decline in affordable housing. And number
Right.
one is that after pandemic, the preference for large houses shot up, and that's where the developers started focusing on.
So, since 2015, the government had launched the PMAY scheme. Has it actually achieved its target? And if not, why?
So, when we talk about Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, it has two components. One is Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana Gramin, which focuses on the rural area, and one
Right.
is Pradhan Mantri Awas Urban, which focuses on the tier one cities. So,
Right.
at the initial stage of its launch, it really helped the overall affordable housing segment, and that's where we saw this sector growing to 45% share in 2029. And the
Yeah.
reasons were quite obvious. Number one, the scheme provided a lot of incentive to the buyer in terms of interest subvention scheme that really kind of reduce the cost of acquisition for the buyer. And on the other hand, the government also provided incentive to the developers in terms of making the profit from the pure affordable housing projects completely tax free. So these two inputs basically really propped up the demand as well as supply. Last 2 years, if you see, schemes have been withdrawn, they have not been renewed. And it also
Okay.
coincided with the steep increase in the cost of construction, and that's where the share of affordable housing has started to shrink. And unless we
Right.
don't bring back these incentives that was earlier provided by Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, I think reviving affordable housing would be challenging.
Okay. So, are land prices and construction costs making affordable houses economically unviable?
The ability of affordable housing to absorb any shock is very limited as compared to your upper segment and high-end product.
Right.
And post COVID, as I mentioned, the demand for large format houses went up, and that's where the developers started to acquire land aggressively because the demand also shot up because of pent up demand. And also in the last 2 years, we have seen back to back disruption because of
Mm.
geopolitical tension that has pushed up the cost of construction quite high for these developers. And that's where the developers are kind of finding it unviable to launch any affordable product in this scenario. So, if you also look at from the buyer side, the
Mm.
typical buyer of affordable housing comes from your unorganized sector, people who are working in SMEs or have their own small businesses. So I think post COVID, this segment is yet to recover from the shocks of pandemic, and also it is also facing the burden of the ongoing geopolitical tension. So that's where the demand is also kind of slowing down from the affordable segment. So it's facing both the supply side as well as demand side challenges.
So, are higher margins in luxury housing distorting the supply of homes across income categories? Do you think that kind of a threat is there among developers?
So definitely that is one of the case. See, developers typically here to generate profits out of their business ventures. And
Right.
when the market is favorably skewed towards bigger size development, luxury and upper segment, where the margin is also quite healthy, I think the developers would focus on that. So this is obviously one of the basic reasons. It's not that the developers do not want to build affordable. The demand is there, but because of these two constraints that I spoke earlier, construction cost going up, land cost has gone up, and on the other hand, the various incentives that were provided in terms of interest subvention schemes for the buyers of affordable housing has been withdrawn. And that is kind of where the developers are finding it difficult to launch a product. And also, even if they launch, the demand is quite slow in that. And if affordable housing does not sells quickly, the margin pressure is quite high. So that's where I would say the developers are focusing on what is currently in demand, and that
Okay.
is right now your upper segment and then bigger size luxury products.
Right. So is stagnant wage growth for a large majority of the population working against affordable housing? How home prices grow in comparison to the wage growth in the past 5 to 10 years?
The house price, I think, has really outpaced the growth in income, and it has
Okay.
also outgrown the inflation for the last
Right.
3 to 4 years that we have seen. Having said that, I think the prices has peaked out, and in the coming quarters and then years, you will see that the price increase are stabilizing, because the market has its own demand supply scenario, and once that equilibrium is tested, the market tends to reach an equilibrium. In
Right.
today's market, where the sentiment is actually quite weak because of AI led job disruption and the geopolitical tension that we are seeing, people are in no hurry to kind of go and book their house. The fear of missing out has gone, and that's where you see the euphoria that you saw a couple of years back in the residential real estate market has kind of subsided. And that's the reason I feel that the price increase will not happen more than 3 to 4% in the coming years. And especially for affordable housing, sooner or later, government will have to intervene. They will have to come up with a very strong public-private partnership policy, which would encourage the developers to come with affordable housing. Because for a country like India, which is actually housing deficit country, affordable housing has to take a central stage if we want to achieve the target for housing for all.
RBI also has been bringing down the interest rates. And how much it would have probably supported the housing segment?
I think in last 2 to 3 years, if you see, the end user actually participated quite significantly because of a very favorable home loan rate that was prevalent. Again, inflation slowly inching up because of the ongoing disruption that we have seen. A further cut in interest rate seems to be quite unlikely, and in
Right.
fact, if the the tensions prolongs, and if we see inflation inching up, we might see a scenario where the RBI is forced to increase interest rates. So what I'm trying to say is the scenario of any further interest rate cut seems unlikely, and also any steep increase in price appreciation also seems quite unlikely, which in fact would bring some kind of stability in this market. And
Okay.
that's where the momentum would return, because if you look at the large pipeline of grade A developers, it seems pretty strong.
So, if lower and middle income households cannot afford houses, what does that imply about the consumption story that we have been hearing about here?
See, after COVID, what we saw, not only in residential real estate sector, across industry, be it automobile, be it your consumer goods, the focus towards premiumization went up. Everybody
Okay.
wanted luxury product. People wanted to buy bigger homes. We saw that shift across the sector. It was a K-shaped recovery that we saw. It's kind of unfortunate that the lower segment that was impacted the most during COVID is yet to recover from the effect of pandemic, and unfortunately, this global disruption, which has severely impacted the small and middle scale industries, has further brought down their purchasing capability. And that's the reason, I strongly believe that affordable housing, no doubt, is the need for a country like India, and that's where the government needs to intervene. And the second aspect, which really needs to be discussed seriously in the policy making scenario, is effective rental housing. It's not important that you should always own a house. But if you have a scenario where you have a very strong rental housing ecosystem in the country, I think that also serves the purpose of housing for all. And that's where we are kind of lacking behind the rest of the world. If you look at the most of the developed countries, they have a very strong rental housing system.
Housing accounts for how much share of the GDP, and if this particular trend continues, will it eventually hit the growth of the economy?
See, currently, housing real estate basically accounts for 7% of the GDP, and it's the
Okay.
second largest employer after agriculture. At the current pace, by 2030, the overall real estate sector would account for close to 13 to 14% of the overall GDP. So,
Right.
for a country like India, the real estate growth story has been only restricted to tier one cities. But now we are seeing that growth, becoming more broad based, where a lot of tier two cities are also coming up for development, and that's where the share of real estate in the GDP is expected to almost double in another 5 to 6 years.
So if affordable housing share is actually coming down, and we are also seeing some kind of a subdued growth in housing, how will it actually affect the growth of the economy?
See, real estate is a very cyclical industry where you will see 3 to 5 years of strong growth, then followed by 2 to 3 years of stabilization, and then again it goes up, and that is a quite healthy way to grow. Because if
Okay.
let's say it will only have a linear growth where you see only upward trajectory in terms of prices appreciation, it would disproportionately impact the inflation, and eventually it will start to hurt the economy. So 4 to 5 years of strong run followed by 2 to 3 years of stabilization and then again grow is the ideal way for a sector to grow. And that's where we are anticipating that the share of real estate in the overall GDP is expected to grow. And when we talk about real estate, it's not only restricted to residential that I'm talking about. If you look
Okay.
at the commercial offices being built, the retail malls being built, the data center being built. So overall, real estate is definitely going to increase its share in the overall GDP of the country.
We just mentioned about housing shortage. So how big is the housing shortage currently? And going ahead, maybe by 2030 or so, how much will it actually grow?
See, as per the latest estimate, if we talk about the country as a whole, not only just the top seven cities, it is estimated that there's close to 2 crores of housing deficit for a country on an overall basis, which is quite huge. And if
Right.
we talk about the number of inventory that we sell on an annual basis, focusing only on just tier one cities, it's close to 5 lakh unit, which is negligible. And
Okay.
that's where the affordable housing has to come into the picture. An effective public-private partnership has to emerge with government support. And then, also an effective rental housing has to also play a central role. Then we can talk about housing for all and problem of urban slum vanishing from all these big cities.
And do you think schemes like PMAY has to be reintroduced, and there should be also redesigned and expanded to improve affordability in the housing segment?
PMOI definitely played a central role, and it has not been stopped. But a couple of incentives that were earlier present are kind of withdrawn. They need to be reintroduced, and I think they have been playing a very central role in overall scheme of the things. And I think in the coming future also, the PMAY scheme will play the central role in pushing affordable housing in the country.
We discussed a lot of reasons why probably the affordable housing segment has been losing its share. But what are your suggestions as to improve this particular segment's demand apart from PMA?
Land is the biggest constituent of a residential project. And today, as I mentioned earlier, that the cost of land has really gone up quite significantly. So for
Right.
affordable housing, I think the government needs to provide land within the city limit dedicated for affordable housing development at a reasonable cost. And today, if you look at the government entities, public sector enterprise, they're sitting on a huge land bank which is unused. So I think that's
Right.
where some kind of unlocking would help the affordable housing. Second part is that on an average, the time taken for the approvals for a residential project is almost 18 to 24 months. And that's a huge time for an affordable housing project. The cost escalates if a developer acquires the land and has to wait for almost 2.5 years for getting the approval. So a dedicated window that provides approval for affordable housing on a say faster basis is the need of hour. Third would be to provide, I would say, concessional finance for the development of affordable housing would also play a significant role in.
Right. So we have seen that affordable housing share has come to single digits, which is a very alarming vision for the housing sector and for the lower middle class people, especially in the cities. So this is a major worry for the country. The government has to do something about it to incentivize that the developers come out with affordable housing projects, and the government also has to let its large land parcels being used for affordable houses. So thank you for joining me on this, Joseph.
Thank you.